Assalamu alaikum, ya doctor.
Wa Walaikum assalam. Long time no see.
Yes, yes. Dr. Mahan and I were recording some other podcast material earlier today at the American Islamic College, and so we we haven't yet tired of each other, and that may be one of the miracles of Ramadan.
Well, I think you're hard to tire of. It's a miracle that you have not tired, uh, and we keep going. But I think it only gets. This is one of those things. The heart only grows fonder, not with
Absolutely.
absence. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder, but in this case, it's been the opposite. So.
Hmm. This everyone should know that this Ramadan Unscripted is the brainchild of Mahan, and it came up in a meeting one afternoon when he looked at us and he said, I have a crazy idea. And so he said, what if every night of Ramadan we just do an unscripted exploration of the Qur'an in and we'll call it something unscripted, because it's about Ramadan is about scripture. So this incredible, I mean, this is what a gift to me. This incredible process and project is really thanks to your crazy idea, Dr. Mahan. So thank you for that. May God
Sure.
reward you.
It was a good brainstorming session, and it's not just one idea, but it's a group that nurtures it, and there's receptivity. So I'm just grateful that we had an environment where we could launch such thought experiments and have them land somewhere, and actually have the capacity to pull it off. So it's been great
Alhamdulillah.
being with you. Yeah, alhamdulillah, and being with so much of our audience. And we'll be getting comments now from different parts of the world, which is really nice to see. There were some comments yesterday on An-Naml, and one by an audience member who was very close to us, and happened to be in the room, who had an insight after we were done. He didn't say anything when we were speaking, but do you want to share that
Yeah,
insight?
no,
Because
it was this is from a Pakistani sage who was listening to us, and his remark was that that in Surah An-Naml, that is the surah of the ants. And remember, last night we were talking about how the ants were worried, speaking to each other, and worried about the army of Suleiman, the army of Solomon coming, and that they might trample the ants or might injure the ants. And so the ants were saying, let's get, we have to hide in our tunnels. And Solomon, of course, heard them and understood their language and smiled, and he didn't really speak back to the ants, but he noticed them, and he smiled and benevolently then immediately launched into a prayer. But it was a beautiful moment where the benevolence of Suleiman, the benevolence of Solomon was there, but also the recognition of something so small in the creation being viewed with appreciation and with esteem and with full attention, meaning that no matter how small things are in the creation, that everything is significant and everything is precious and everything is valuable and worth attending to. Is that a fair reflection of
yeah,
the comment?
yeah, and the idea that here's Solomon with his army, and here come the ants with their army, and each has their own mission and their own task, and it's all important at their own scale. And it was just a marveling at God's creation, that every individual and every community in the hierarchy of creation, if we can say that, has its own charge.
Yeah.
And so that was just a lovely. I thought that was a lovely insight.
It was, and we promised him that we would begin tonight with that, because it was something that neither one of us had really thought of, but it was beautiful. The mission and vision of the American Islamic College, to me, pretty much now synonymous with the work. I believe in the transformative power of education, and not just education that is informative, but in education that is transformative, education that really changes how we live. But I think that the Muslims of America need a place that they can come as a Muslim space. This is their space. It belongs to them. You know, Mahan, you mentioned earlier today that you hate hearing your own voice. I also cringe at the sound of my own voice, but I raise my voice when I feel like something needs to be said. And one thing that I think needs to be said in response to that short video is that, you know, the American College belongs to everyone who's with us on these evenings. You know, the American Islamic College higher education is an incredibly expensive and incredibly difficult project to embark upon. Right now in the United States, colleges are closing with incredible rapidity. I read an article several months ago that was clocking it at one college closing per week because of the decimation of what the pandemic did to, you know, college enrollments, and there are all kinds of reasons why colleges are failing across the country, and we're growing one. We're growing a college. There are only 2 independent, fully accredited Muslim institutions of higher education in North America, and we have the privilege of working for and with one of them, and so I've always prayed that this dream of the American Islamic College, this dream of an institution that would seek to serve the entirety of the Muslim mosaic in all of its diversity, and serve the nation and the world as a place where people can come from different situations and different locations and learn from one another and grow together in full dignity and in full respect, and also the society as a whole, that this would be a place where people of all faiths and backgrounds would be welcome. And indeed, that is woven into the very language of our mission and vision, that we welcome students of all faiths and backgrounds. And so this institution is really very special. I've never seen another institution quite like it. And you know, it's because of the college that we're able to to do this program. It's because of the college that we're able to not just run this program, but to host and design programs, lectures, all kinds of things that are for the benefit of the entire society, not just for the people within the 4 walls of a classroom. And now, because of the internet and because of technology, we now have the ability to offer fully accredited courses and learning opportunities to people worldwide. And so now we have friends in Malaysia and in Pakistan and in so many different countries, in Turkey, and so many different countries that are able to tune in and to benefit from our programs. And my hope and prayer has always been that the dream will continue to grow, not as my dream or as your dream, but as our collective dream. And as we join the dream, we're adding our own unique ideas and our own unique insights and energies, and certainly, just as is evidence tonight, right? This was your beautiful idea, Mahan. It was your crazy idea, and then it just required a crazy companion who was willing to join you on this journey. And so I was like, I'll go, I'll go. And here we are, right, on the 21st night of the blessed month of Ramadan. And so I would just ask people to, you know, think seriously this Ramadan about you know, supporting the college in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be monetary, but of course, we need resources, of course, to function and to keep the dream growing. And so I would just, ask everyone who's with us tonight and who joins us in their own time. I would just ask everyone to dream with us and to about what does the world need from a university today? What does the world need from an institution of higher education? And what can that look like? And if you have ideas, we are excited and eager to meet with you, to hear from you, and to work with you to bring those ideas that will bring benefit, ideas that will bring healing, ideas that will bring light in darkness, ideas that will bring new hope and new trajectories as a human family are facing some of the most daunting challenges, some of the most heart quaking challenges that our human family has ever faced. And so we're here to face those together, God willing, with knowledge, with wisdom, and with faith. So please consider supporting the American Islamic College, and thanks again for being with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. You articulated a very inspiring vision. And I think with that, we can just jump into our
let's do it.
Meeting. We're in Qasas,
which is the 28th surah.
The 28th surah.
Yes.
And we just pick a few nuggets here so we can keep advancing. And we're going to just go with a couple of verses from 56 in the middle, 56 and 57, where, the Prophet, now you can imagine, this is not a great analogy, but since maybe it'll work, since we just started with, and we haven't done this on any night really, a kind of a pitch for support for the college. Occasionally you've seen that little banner, and there are lots of worthy causes out there. Everyone is, especially in this season, putting themselves forward and seeking support. But ultimately, the greatest cause, the cause in history, was the cause of the prophets. And they would come down with revelation, and they would approach the people, and they would try and convey God's words. And more often than not, and we saw that there never was a prophet sent that the people rejected. They pushed back. And you can imagine the anguish that would cause the prophet, who's first and foremost a true believer, the truest of believers. And this is why, and awwalul muslimin, it said, the prophet said, I'm the first to truly believe. Amana Rasul, the prophet believed. And so when the prophet's own loved ones would reject the message, or people around him, or even strangers, I can't imagine the anguish, because he knows what they're rejecting and what the ultimate consequences could be. And so here in this verse, it's being said, you prophet cannot guide everyone you love to the truth.
Yeah.
It's not about who you love. And you don't have their hearts in your hand.
Yeah.
In your hands. It's the heart kind of moves between the
the fingers of the Rahman, as we say.
The fingers of
one of the names of God in Arabic, one of the ways that the Prophet, upon him be peace, referred to God as Muqallib al-Qulub, the turner.
Right. The turner of the heart. And we already saw the verse that God comes between a man and his heart.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it is God who guides whoever he will. And from a certain point of view, there's this helplessness, like I've been charged with this mission and I want to see the results. But then there's this great release that the prophets only have to convey. Yeah. But what people do with it is not his responsibility. And so don't take that burden. You have to leave things to God, ultimately. And that's a profound message here, just directly being articulated. You can't guide everyone that you love to the truth. It is God who guides whoever he will. He knows best those who follow guidance. Yeah. And then they say, if we were to follow guidance with you, prophet, we would be swept from our land.
Yeah.
Because they were, his immediate audience in Mecca was in this sanctuary, a place that was protected. Have we not established for them a secure sanctuary where every kind of produce is brought. The pilgrims would come. There were trade. It was a merchant city, and all kinds of prosperity would pass through that sanctuary that was built by Abraham, and according to our tradition, with his son. And so it's brought as a provision from us. But most of them do not comprehend. We've destroyed many a community that once reveled in its wanton wealth and easy living. Since then, their dwelling places have barely been inhabited. We are the only heir. And so don't think that this stuff is permanent, right? Your Lord would never destroy towns without first raising a messenger in their midst. And so the messenger has come, the warner has come, but ultimately don't think that you can be the guardians of your own prosperity. This comes from God, and he takes it away. And this kind of brings us to the Qarun. I think it connects to the story of Qarun.
It does, but before we go there, you had mentioned earlier today, you had mentioned another reading of this, and that is the idea that being taken from our place of security, that to say yes to Islam in that early Meccan period meant that you were going to receive very powerful opposition from your loved ones, from your family, from your relatives, possibly even violence. And so saying yes to God's call in that environment meant you were going to pay a price, and that you were going to give up that sense of security. So do you want to just speak a little bit about that? Like if we think of sanctuary here now in psychological and spiritual terms, like how you also read this verse.
Yeah, and actually I was echoing, I just been reading from the study Qur'an, and it says there, at a spiritual level, this verse can refer to those who offer various kinds of excuses to themselves or others as to why they have not or cannot embark on the spiritual life, or why they cannot give up such and such in their attachment to the world. Because were they to do so, even though they know that that is something they must do if they were to pursue the truth, it would have consequences, that they would have to give up a place of comfort in which they find themselves in the present moment, and they're not willing to give that up. And this is a warning, I think, to that kind of a
way of thinking.
Of thinking. And we will see in the surahs that are coming up, we've already seen before that, what's centered here is a trial, that you're being summoned and there will be consequences, and you have to decide where your allegiances are. Is it with your own kind of wealth and your lifestyle and a sense of security that you think you have, which is from God anyways, but you think you've kind of got it? Or is it with God? And then you will accept the consequences of that allegiance, but also with a complete trust that it all is from God and comes from God anyways. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Qarun.
Okay, let's do it.
So Qarun, to my knowledge, was not a figure I ever knew biblically. So Qarun is a uniquely mentioned in the Qur'an. So this is a really interesting, and again, it's a teaching story. Like so many of the stories in the Qur'an, it's kind of just a flash. It's kind of just a reference to a story that the people might already be somewhat familiar with, but it's a story that is designed to teach us something, teach us a lesson. So let's look at the Qarun. Are you at 76 then?
I'm at 76.
Okay, good.
So Qarun, maybe we just kind of read the story and then reflect on it. Qarun, this is verse 76, was one of Moses' people, but he oppressed them. We had given him such treasures that even their keys would have weighed down a whole company of strong men. His people said to him, "Do not gloat, for God does not like people who gloat." Seek the life to come by means of what God has granted you, but do not neglect your rightful share in this world. Do good to others as God has done good to you. Do not seek to spread corruption in the land, for God does not love those who do this. So, but he answered, people said this to him, and he answered, this wealth was given to me on account of the knowledge I possess.
Yeah.
قال إنما أوتيته على علم عندي.
Yeah.
This is my knowledge which I have. Did he not know that God had destroyed many generations before him? So this is now being warned. Who had greater power than him and built up greater wealth. The guilty will not be questioned about their sins. He went out among his people in all his pomp, and those whose aim was the life of this world said, if only we had been given something like what Qarun has been given.
Yeah.
But this is only those whose aim was the life of this world. He really is a very fortunate man. But those who were given knowledge said, alas for you, God's reward is better for those who believe and do good deeds. Only those who are steadfast will attain this. Then we caused the earth to swallow him and his house. And he had not the least little party to help him against God, nor could he defend himself. And the next day, those who had the day before wished to be in his place exclaimed, alas for you, Qarun. It is God alone who gives what he will, abundantly or sparingly, to whichever he will of his creatures. If God had not been gracious to us, he would have caused the earth to swallow us too. Alas, indeed, those who deny the truth will never prosper. So that's the story of Qarun. Go ahead.
And this is a longer and more narrative way of saying something that we're seeing repeated often in these short Meccan chapters, and that is the superiority of the hereafter over this world. And we see this. This is very graphically done here, but it's we see this repeated again and again in these Meccan surahs, that we should not be delusioned, right? We should not be deluded by our love of this world, the glitter of this world, and we should look to the things that are truly valuable and truly meaningful. And for those who refuse to be deluded and who hold fast to who are generous and who are believing and who are righteous, that what's waiting for them is far superior to anything that this world can offer. This is a message which is going to come again and again and again in these Meccan verses that we've been looking at.
Yeah. And the two things that stand out to me, one is, this is knowledge that I have. Inni innama utituhu ala ilmin indi. It's such a contrast to what we just read with the Ibadur Rahman, the servants of the Most Merciful.
Yes.
Whose first quality in a litany of qualities is those who walk on the earth humbly. And he is walking as if, he's not accountable, and somehow he's accomplished this, independently. And this whole idea of, independence, like I can do things on my own. It's such a farce. But that is, being challenged here. First of all, he can't even, control the rhythm of his own heart, really. I mean, let alone, the storehouses that he's been entrusted with. But then, so that's one, thing that strikes out at me. And we see this all the time, like you said, with people who feel like they're at the top of their game in terms of wealth and power and think they're invincible. But it's not going to last. We know that. So they need to remember that. And secondly, just the manner of his demise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and this is an actual phenomenon. There are sinkholes. The earth seems stable, but underneath it's molten. There are tectonic plates.
Mhm.
And, at any moment, it can actually open and swallow you. And this
Mhm.
happens. It happens every day today. And now we can actually see it when people post it on social media and Twitter. You can see like sinkholes that open up. It's not very common, but it's common enough that it can be captured by people on camera. And it's quite frightening. And I've actually begun, when I read something like this, like I actually feel like, I'm in this house, but at any moment,
It
what
could be.
guarantee do I have that that I'm gonna still be here? There is none. And so you suddenly begin to like be thankful at every moment for something other than yourself, which is
Yeah.
quite a profound kind of alteration of state of mind that something like this offers.
Yeah, and the other feature here is all the people who are so enamored, so impressed by him, like they want to be, they want to be him. They want that, they want the fame, they want the arrogance, they want the, like
Right.
he's like what we would, people today who claim to be like a self-made millionaire. I'm a self-made man. I'm like, he's got that swank and swagger,
Right.
and people are just wanting to, wanting to be him in a way, and just emulating him, and it's almost a form of like idolizing. People are just
Right.
idolizing people for no reason other than the fact that that God, for reasons unknown to us, has decided to, to give him this ample or abundant provision, and that we're so easily uh, deluded by that, and
Yeah.
somehow we think that people who have wealth somehow have more value, more wisdom, more, their voice counts more, their and all of that just vanishes in that moment when he's swallowed up by the earth, and then it's almost as if a spell has been broken,
Yeah.
and people see, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't have idolized him.
Yeah.
But I think in this world of wealthy celebrities and this world of kinds of idols, I think that this is a very contemporary kind of story for us. I don't We don't need to put any names on Qarun, any contemporaries, but I think we can all think of any who are who kind of swagger out of money.
Yeah. Right. And I suppose the first name that should come to mind, and that comes to my mind, is myself. I mean, I don't have a storehouses and keys that would weigh an army down, but to be mindful that we shouldn't. This is from somewhere else, and it goes back, and we belong to him, and to him we return. Al Ankabut.
It's a very Ramadan. It's a beautiful.
All right, Al Ankabut. I noticed a little bit of delay in our feed today.
Am I glitching, or are you
Yeah,
glitching? Maybe it's me.
yeah, skipping a little bit, but I think we're in sync now. Are you back?
Okay. I think so. No, I'm
Yeah,
not back.
slight glitch. It's coming and going.
Just let me leave.
Oh, you're going to leave. It's like the earth. swallowing us up as we talked about it. Only the cyber, the cyber Earth. I think I'm alone. I'm alone now, and he'll be back soon. So we'll give it a moment. But as he comes back, we're going to turn next to Surah Al-Ankabut. The name of the surah literally means the spider. And it's from one verse that we'll read in the course of the few nuggets that we'll pick out from this surah. The namings of the surahs is actually quite interesting. It doesn't necessarily have any rhyme or reason. It's just something that was there to help remember the surah as a whole, anything. So if it mentions the cow, and that's a prominent story, the whole surah would be named the cow. So it doesn't have to have any particular reason for that name. Some surahs are known by more than one name, and sometimes the surah will be named by a theme, not even a word that appears in that surah, like al-Ikhlas, on the oneness of God. So I'm going to continue, hoping that Dr. Timothy will join us back. This is Surah 29, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Alif Lam Mim. And with that, Dr. Timothy is back. We're launching off into Al-Ankabut. And it's got a very striking opening. Do people think ahasiban nas an yutraku an yaqulu amanna? Do people think that they will be left alone after saying we believe, wa hum la yuftanun, and they won't be put to the test?
Yeah.
Like they won't face trials? And we didn't read this particular ayah when we read Al-Baqarah, the second surah on the cow, but it was وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ. We will certainly test you with fear and hunger and loss of wealth and even your lives and fruits. And you can think of the fruits of your labor or your toil. You work hard to set up a business or build a home, and then you may have to put it on the line. And this will be a test.
Yeah.
Right? And so do you think you will be left alone? You say, I believe, but then there will be no test. وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. There's an emphasis. We tested those who went before them. And God will certainly mark out which ones are truthful and whose claims are false. Like they say they believe, but when it comes to the test, they back off. And it means they really don't. Do the evildoers think يَعْمَلُونَ السَّيِّئَاتِ, those people who do bad things, who practice evil, that they can get the better of us? Like they can do this and there will be no consequence. It's a very powerful, the Qur'an is full of, and we'll see in the last surahs and the last nights, this theme will pick up, especially towards the end. Do they not think they will be raised again? Like they will be able to get the better of us? How ill they judge. Sa'a ma yahkumun. But as for those who strive for their meeting with God, who whose hopes are in the meeting with God.
Who are hoping, looking forward to meeting God.
يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّ أَجَلَ اللَّهِ لَآتٍ. So the hour, the term, the appointed term is surely coming, and He is the one who hears and knows all things. And whosoever, this I'm going to make this the last of this sequence, and then we'll jump around. But keep this in mind, because it'll come up at the last line of the surah. Incredibly, probably one of my favorite ayats in the Quran. وَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ لِنَفْسِهِ. And whosoever strives, and those who exert themselves, and if any strive, they do so for the good of their own souls. Because when you're striving, you often think like, well, I'm doing this for you, or I did this for you. Like, you think you're doing it for someone other than yourself. Like, you're doing someone a favor. And God will say, you're not doing me any favors. This is for your own good. They do so for their own souls. God does not need his creatures, right? For God is free of all needs from all creation. So this is the beginning of Ankabut, and this is a message that's probably central to the surah.
Yeah. There's something counterintuitive, though, about, okay, God, I'm going to say yes to you. And then God says, okay, here come the tests, right? And so it's kind of counterintuitive, because and I think we touched on this before in one of our other Ramadan Unscripted nights, this idea that when bad things happen to us, when difficult things happen to us, we often think that God is punishing us, or that like we've done something, like, what have I done to deserve this?
Right.
And here it's like the people who say yes, the people who are putting their lives on the line and their homes and their security, who are sacrificing their security, and then they're being told, do you think that when you're just going to say that we believe, and we're not going to test you? And so I often think that part of our prayer every day in Surah Al-Fatiha is to walk the path of those whom God blesses. Sirat al-ladina an'amta alayhim. And when we ask that, when we offer that prayer to walk the path of those whom God blesses, that prayer, to be sincere, that prayer requires some courage, because we know from the story of Joseph, for example, Yusuf alayhi salam, that he suffered terrible indignities. He suffered terrible injustices before God lifted him up to a position of prominence. We know that the Prophet Muhammad also, upon him be peace, also suffered tremendous injustices. We know that Isa, like all of the prophets who are mentioned in the Qur'an, are mocked and maligned, and people are plotting against them, and people are plotting to undo them, or people are plotting to do violence to them. And so to say yes to faith is I think is an act of courage, because if we're asking to be among God's beloveds, then we know that there's an admission fee here that very few souls have the courage or the willingness to pay if they knew how high it could be.
Right. And I like what you said before once, that when God loves you, he keeps testing you, because that the only one that a believer knows, that the only one he can trust is God. And so the tests keep him close to God. He keeps calling on God. Whereas if he's not tested and left in his comforts, he's in danger of becoming heedless. But God wants him close, which is counterintuitive, but a very interesting, I think, way of reading it. And this is what comes up in verse 10. There are some people who say, we believe in God, but when they suffer for his cause, exactly what you were saying, they think that human persecution is as severe as God's punishment, or they treat men's oppression as if it were the wrath of Allah. That's the two translations I have. So
they treat it like punishment.
Yeah, they treat it like punishment, like instead of a test, right?
Right.
Or that it's a test coming from God through the people. They treat it as punishment from God. Yet, if any helps comes to you, O Prophet, from your Lord, they will say, we've always been with you. Like, they're kind of in between these modes of a lack of tranquility, that whether it's hardship or it's ease, it's all from God.
Yeah.
They're interpreting it, in ways that are causing them great anguish. And there's, almost switching sides, as it were, based on the circumstances. Does God not know best what is in everyone's hearts? God will be sure to mark out which ones are the believers and which ones are the hypocrites. And this, topic of hypocrites, it begins to increase in the later Meccan and definitely in the Medinan period.
Yes.
And then the last maybe couple in this sequence, or maybe I'll just read. Yeah, those who, this is verse 12, the وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, though the ingrates,
The ingrates.
those who kind of deny God's revelations, they will say to the believers, follow our path and we shall bear the consequences of your sins. I've actually had someone say this to me before. But don't worry about this, if anything consequence, I'll take it on for you. And so, yet they will not do so. They are, in fact, liars. They will bear their own burdens and others besides. So, everyone bears the burden of their own sin. So that was, just a noteworthy sequence there of caution. And the Quran is, both giving glad tidings but also warning. And then the verse on the spider, which is verse 41. If I just jump ahead.
We're bypassing again. We're bypassing lots of stories from the prophets, and we see Lot and other things in the. But our time is always working against us here. So yes, let's go to 41 there.
The parable of those who take protectors other than God. مثل الذين اتخذوا من دون الله أولياء. Is that of the spider. That's where the surah gets its name.
Yeah.
Who builds to itself a house. But truly the flimsiest of houses is the spider's house, if they but knew. And, this is such an interesting example because for the spider, right, it's such a firm dwelling. And pound for pound, a spider's web is tougher than steel. Right? But in the scale of things, if you put it in perspective, strong wind or heavy rain, we just wipe it out. And so you think you have a strong house, but really you're building, you're basically just building a web that will be washed away.
And it's interesting that even earlier today, when we were thinking about Qarun, like it wasn't just him who was swallowed up; it was also his house.
Right.
Yeah, and it was like his place of his stronghold, his place of security, and I'm sure it was a beautiful house.
Yeah. So some beautiful verses on recitation of the Quran, maybe just 45 and 46.
Because 46 to me is really very special. So let's read those two, and then we can move forward because we're now at 43 minutes past the hour, and we still have a few more surahs.
Oh my God!
But of course, I console you, and I console myself in the fact that it's always going to be the quality and not the quantity of what we cover. So right. Let's give these ayat their due. Give these verses their due.
All right. So the Prophet is being commanded, Utslu ma uhiya ilayka min al-kitab. Recite what has been revealed to you of the scripture. Keep up the prayer. Prayer restrains outrageous and unacceptable behavior or shameful and unjust deeds. Fahsha wal munkar. And so the prayer should actually, not just be a ritual motion, but it should be transformative in terms of your conduct and the way that you are in the world. وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. And the remembrance of God is the greatest thing in life, without doubt. And God knows everything that you're doing. And it leads into this beautiful verse, number 46. Should I read it? Do you want to read it?
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
So,
It's
believer,
yeah.
yeah, oh believers, argue only in the best way with the peoples of the book. And in fact, it's phrased the other way. وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ
Yeah.
إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ.
Yeah.
So only argue, or do not argue, except in a way that is the most
Most beautiful.
most beautiful. Except with those, yeah. إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. In a way that is best way, in the most beautiful way. Except with those of them who would act unjustly or inflict wrong and injury. Say, we believe in what was revealed to us and what was revealed to you. Our God and your God are one and the same. We're devoted to him. So it's a lovely and inclusive verse. You had said you find it special. You want to say something?
No, I just love, again, this affirmation of the unity of revelation, right? And this idea that 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 at a deeper level, this is all one religion, right? And that as Maulana Rumi says in one of his poems, that those who are truly devoted to God have no religion except for God. And there's a sense of that here, right? That look, we're all worshiping the same God. We believe in what has been revealed to us, and also what has been revealed to you. So let's not fight, right?
Right.
Because we're worshiping the same God.
Yeah. And I've gone through this many times, the Qur'an and the nights of Ramadan, and with, like I mentioned, Dr. Israr, and did my own study. And like you have your, Qur'an, I have like 3 volumes of these, all written with notes, and but never has this theme jumped out to me as much as it has in these sessions with you. And it's repeated so often that the prophets will be mentioned one after the other. And then it's all men. And then it'll be, and the one who guarded her chastity will be included in reference to Mary. And then it'll say, this is a community. This is one ummah.
Yeah.
This is one community. It's an incredibly, maybe it was meant to open up at this time for me. I'm thinking myself personally, but I've been thinking of all kinds of things. This might sound as unscripted, so I'm just going to mention. But in terms of the public good, religion in the public square, religion and politics, the Islamic secular, and how values can be attached to governance, especially given the complete breakdown that we're seeing right now in a society that cherishes, and the great virtue to it, the disestablishment of religion, but then has lost so much. And when religion is established, especially when it's kind of ethnic, there's so much that it brings with it that's not wholesome. And so how do we think of things like khilafa, and
Stewardship.
and stewardship and governance, in conversation with political theory, and so the idea of a plural establishment, like when it's one that's established, it otherizes, right? And it tends to set itself apart, and then brings out the worst kinds of contrasts. But when it's done in a plural way, then we tend to bring out the best in each other. And is there a way to think of more like a plural establishment that can help take the world to a better place? It's just a rough idea, and I know that Rowan Williams has talked about something like this with the Church of England, and so I feel there are echoes as I think of the great themes of the Qur'an, and the charge that it's giving human beings as custodians and as successors. The righteous shall inherit the earth. With and the Khilafah, the Caliphate, actually belonging to Bani Adam, or the children of Adam. It's not exclusive to one community. And so now, can we think of ourselves as a global community through an Islamic lens, and not view ourselves as just mainly one group identity amongst the various other identities competing in the public square, but as somehow in an inclusive way, that this is all part of God's, the successors are all here, and we have to figure it out in a more inclusive way. So I don't know if that made a lot of sense, but
No, it does, and it also includes elements of our conversations earlier today about friendship.
right,
Because the even when the Quran is addressing the Christian community and the Jewish community, and we read this earlier, Ya Ahl al-Kitab lastum ala shay. You, O peoples of the book, you stand upon nothing until you raise up the Torah and the Injil and what has been revealed to you from your Lord. And so there's even a Quranic sense of not demanding total uniformity, but encouraging people to be better, to be more faithful in their own community, and according to what God has given them. And again, one of the verses that we've read is, that to each community we've given a religious like law in a way, in order that we might test you in what we've given you. And so there's this sense that part of the interreligious, how shall I say, the interreligious imperative, right, is learning to encourage one another in the good, but allowing one another the freedom to conceive of that and to understand it and to embrace it in a way that is unique to them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this verse that, O peoples of the book, you stand on nothing until you establish the Torah and the Injil. When Dr. Israr would teach this, he would immediately say after it, and basically what this is saying is, Ya Ahl al-Quran lastum ala shay. Like, and
Yes.
O people of the Quran, you are all nothing if you don't establish. And so it's not just pointing fingers at other communities, but it's instructing us together.
Yeah.
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 I have a
And
question.
I really appreciate, I know our time is ticking tonight, but I really appreciate the way you have steered your own interpretation of some of these verses in an introspective way tonight. I really appreciate that. Even with Qarun, I was thinking of, famous people who are walking with that swagger, but you're absolutely right that first and foremost, we should be holding ourselves accountable, and we should be addressing the Qarun who's inside our own hearts and inside our own minds. And because we all have a little of that arrogance, we all have a little of that vanity, and before we, as Jesus says in the Gospels, before we pick at the speck in our brother's eye, we should be looking at the log in our own. And
Right.
and so I appreciate the way you've turned the tafsir of tonight, our interpretation of the Quran, back onto
Yeah,
ourselves.
but I wasn't saying it to the exclusion of what you had already pointed out, which is equally compelling. It was just when I was sitting reading this morning, I was thinking, my God, I could be gone in the earth. Like, it could actually open up right now. What is keeping it up here?
Yeah.
I had this like frightening thought, but there's a question that came up on that. I don't have the answer to it, and so I was just looking down in the study of Quran. I didn't see it pop out at me. The question is, does Qarun's house also refer to his family members? It's a tough, like, who all is absorbed, and taken into a punishment that's been ultimately brought down on this one individual? It's a good question. I think I'm going to let it sit, but if you would
Yeah,
like to
I don't
comment.
think there's any way. I don't think there's any way for us to answer that in a clear way. But it's also very clear from even the verses that we've read tonight that even if others were affected by that calamity, that we don't carry one another's burdens to God, that we each go to God individually, and that no one can carry our burdens for us.
Right,
And so
right.
even if other people were involved in that or other calamities, it's that the journey back to God is a journey that we make individually.
Hmm. Yeah, and then and that is, and there was the other verse that said, the prayer that to God to protect us from a fitna that we can get caught up in, that doesn't come directly to us, but we get kind of caught up in it because it's somehow in our proximity, and so, but we don't know the specifics of this. Maybe we'll just wrap up here with, there's two verses of Ankabut,
Okay.
just one verse each, if that's okay with you, and
Yeah,
then we can wrap up.
which one are you looking at?
So 64, and then the last verse,
Okay.
which
Okay.
is 69.
Yeah.
So 64, we used to have a teacher who would occasionally break out into Punjabi. My Punjabi isn't really good, but like the tafsir sounds something else in Punjabi. And he would explain this verse. And he did an incredible job of the way he did it. The life of this world is merely amusement and diversion, right?
Mm.
Or an amusement and play.
Yeah.
And he
No.
took it literally, and he said, imagine when you go to see a play, you get all these characters, right? And they put on costumes. This is how he explained it. And they play different roles, but that's not truly who they are. And so you might have the lead actor, like a pauper, right? Or, and the king may just have a few lines, or the king may take center stage, but like the really famous person off screen is, a different character. But these are all masks. And then in the end of that 2-3 hours, you have this, and you take it off and you go away. And so that's the life of this world. Is I was born here, I got this role, I'm working as in this capacity, but you're gonna take it off. And وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. It's the
Yeah.
abode of the hereafter. That is the life indeed. And when we go off stage, right, that's who you are. And so the life of this world is like what happens on stage for a brief time. When you get off stage, that's who you really are. And so where all the masks are going to come off. And it's not going to be whether you were in this exalted station or if you had this but the role you were given, how well you played it. And that's on the basis of that, you're going to get the Academy Award, or, whatever you want to call it. And he did this in this very colloquial Punjabi, accent. And I remember getting blown away by that imagery. And this, when I come back to this verse, I remember him. So always I wanted to honor him. Rahmatullah Buttar Sahab was
May
his name.
may God be merciful to him.
But he opened up that verse to me. And then there's the last verse of the surah, which then ties into the beginning.
Yeah.
وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Like,
Yeah.
and as for those who strive in our cause, we will certainly guide them to our paths. Because what happens is, when you strive in God's cause, you encounter difficulties. And we have now, we know people in our personal lives, who are going through difficulties because they stood up for things. And it seems like the path is going to close up. But it's at that moment, like, if you strive, God opens up the paths. It's a
Mhm.
incredible, you know, verse of that gives you hope in the struggle, and to not back down because you think that the path is closing up. Wa inna Allaha la'al muhsinin. And
Yeah.
God is with those who do good, who are people of ihsan, like who do things in the most beautiful of ways. So those
Wow.
are the ones.
Just a quick question. You
Yeah,
know, literally, the Arabic doesn't say strive in our cause. You know, literally, it's striving in
yeah,
us or
in
for
us.
us.
Yeah,
So, so do you think there's another way to read that in terms not um, in contradiction to your point or not in exclusion to your point, but is there a more intimate way that we might read that?
show me the way.
No, no, no. I'm just wondering because the idea is that certainly striving for God would include standing for justice, and the people that you've mentioned in a very general way are we're thinking of people who have stood for the protection of innocence and for standing, raising their voices for justice, and have paid terrible prices in this world. But also I'm thinking that the mystics also read this as a way of striving not just in God's cause, but striving to be closer to God, to
Yeah,
walk with God, to see God's face, to have a more intimate walk with the divine, and
yeah,
that God promises that those who strive with this kind of intention, that we will we will open paths for them.
yeah. I think certainly those, can be read at those multiple levels. And my inclination was to read it in light of kind of the opening of the
Yeah.
surah, which was speaking of, you will certainly be tested and tried. And then,
Yes.
but and I think those two kind of struggles, strivings are ultimately one and the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
intertwined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because there's no way to strive for God without striving for all of these qualities of God, right? The justice and there's no way to, as the Quran says, there's no way to be faithful to one's prayers and deny the needs of the orphan and the suffering and the wayfarer, and that this is what we're going to read again as we get closer to the end here. This is what it means to turn religion into a lie, and so is to say our prayers and to be neglecting the cries of the poor and those who are in need. And so as I always think of it, that prayer is the beginning and not the end of our true duty and obligation to God and to the creation.
It's lovely. Well, um, I think that's a beautiful place to leave it. We have fallen far short in one sense. We had to do a little bit of Room and Luqman and the Sajda and start Asaf by today. But I have an idea. I think we should pick one night and just go the distance. Like have a cup of tea or a pot of tea and spend, 2-3 hours maybe on one of the odd nights, maybe the 27th night, and cover some of the distance that we haven't been able to do in the span of our hour. But maybe we can discuss that and see if that makes sense.
Well, I've followed you and your crazy ideas before, so this won't be the first time. Yes.
Yeah, I suppose I could do it off camera, but we can call it a night. Thank you, dear brother. It was a good,
Thank you.
lovely evening again, and may
No.
God bless you and all of our viewers. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to continue to see you over these last 10 nights. And these these recordings will be up, so they can be viewed anytime during the year if they're helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you close us out with Surah Al-Asr, please, and then I'll
Yes.
let you go for tonight. Jazakallah
Sure.
khairan.
Sure. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I seek refuge in God from Satan, the accursed, in the name of God, most compassionate and merciful. By the passage of time through the ages, or by the late afternoon, when we take account for what we've gained and what we've lost, profit and loss. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. All of humankind is in a state of loss, except for those who have believed and have righteous conduct, and they exhort one another to that which is true and real and haqq, and they exhort one another to remain constant and to persevere in the face of hardship.
Ameen. Ameen. Thank you, Sidi.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Assalamu alaikum. See you tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.